Okay, so we're looking at Tanya chapter 39. So we're making progress. We're at 39 out of 53. So we already have to start planning the party for the conclusion. Where are we in the big picture? The big picture is we spent 3 chapters, 35, 36, and 37, talking about the primacy of action and how the purpose of creation is for action, to make a dwelling place for God in this physical world. So it was all about action, action, action. That's what we explained in the first 3 chapters, 3 chapters of 35, 36, 37. 38, 39, and 40, and to some extent, the next many chapters talks about however, having said that the most important thing is action. Having said that, intention is also critical. It's also important. And as we said last time we met, that yes, you want to build a home, but you also want the home for God, which is done through action, but you also want the home to be illuminated, to have light, have energy, and that happens through intention. And we mentioned briefly last week that there's different levels of intention, and we're going to explain that at great length today in this chapter. So again, the warning is it's about intention. It's a very Kabbalistic chapter, talks about the 4 spiritual worlds, and talks about how the different levels of intention raise the mitzvah to the consciousness of one of the 4 spiritual worlds. So there's a lot of Kabbalah. So if you're one type of intention, you go to the second world of formation, the second world. If you are a higher level of intention, you go to the third world, third from the bottom, creation. If you're a righteous person, like we mentioned in chapter 35, like a chariot, with no ego whatsoever, then you go to the highest world, to Atzilut. What happens if a person does a mitzvah without any intention, or worse, with a negative intention, studies Torah for their own ego, to become famous, to become prominent? Then the mitzvah goes nowhere. It stays in this world, and you have to correct it. So that's going to be the detailed discussion in this chapter. But again, all this is to tell us is that yes, while the mitzvah, the purpose of creation is action, and we make every time we take a positive action, we're actually building a home for God in this world. But the question is, what kind of home? What kind of consciousness will be present in that home? And when he says in Kabbalistic terms, when I do a mitzvah with intention, I raise the mitzvah to the second or third or highest world. What I'm really saying is that I am bringing this action to this action that I'm doing has the consciousness of that spiritual world. Because remember, when we say there are 4 spiritual worlds, the higher, lower, 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 it's not geographical, it's not spatial, it's not physical space, because it's spiritual. What it means is that you could be living in this physical world, but you have the awareness of the spiritual world. And that depends on the intention that the person will have through doing the mitzvah. And again, depending on the type of intention, which again, when we say intention here, what we really mean is motivation, love, awe, devotion. So it's really emotional awareness as well. So depending on that, that's how beautiful the home will be. But the home itself, nevertheless, everything we said now is true. Everything we said in the previous chapters about the primacy of action is true. But there's also a dimension for the intention. So I'm just going to make a confession or two. Number one, it's not such an easy chapter to understand. I'm not sure I understand it fully. Number two, if I just took this chapter and read this and taught this chapter, you would say, wow, this is beautiful Kabbalah. But you wouldn't think it's the same author that wrote chapter 35, 36, and 37. In other words, the chapters that talk about action. So it's actually, you have to be able to balance both. That yes, in one sense, action is the most important. Action builds the home. But then you have the home. Fine, that's 35, 36, 37. You built a home. But just building a home is that's the construction. That's the what do they call it? The builder. But then this chapter is about the interior design. And the interior design, what kind of home, what kind of atmosphere, what will the home feel like? Oh, it's a whole nother story. And if the interior designer talks about a home, and if the builder talks about a home, it's going to sound differently. What does the builder say? Let's build simple. I just want it to be structurally sound. I want a place that can withstand the snow. An interior designer has, no, I want atmosphere. I want emotion. I want this to make you feel good. It's a different expression. It's a different idea. There could be no interior designer if there's no shelter from the rain. So that metaphor holds true. Chapter 35, 36, 37, the construction crew that's building the home for God is talking. In other words, that's the action that builds the home. Chapter 37, 38 and 39 and 40 is really going to talk about the interior designer perspective. What kind of awareness do you want within that home? So for me, that metaphor works because it sounds so different than what we have been saying earlier. But yes, just like your interior designer and your builder also don't sound that similar. After we do that, just to give you where we're spaced in Tanya for the next 10 chapters, from chapter 41 to chapter 50, we talk about different forms of meditation. Because now that we talked about it, it's so important to have love and awe, to be able to have the proper intention. So help me meditate. Okay, so we have 10 chapters about that. And then final 3 chapters, we get back to the idea of action, to the divine presence, dwelling in the temple, dwelling in this world, dwelling in the temple. So that sort of comes back to the action metaphor. So that's a little bit of the introduction. I hope it at least places us where we need to be. Like I said, it's very Kabbalistic, so please do not hesitate to interject at this point or at any point. At some point you say, I'm getting confused. Let's stop and let's catch our breath and let's figure out where we are. That's fine as well. So that's introduction. Again, 4 spiritual worlds is important to understand for this chapter. According to the Kabbalah, God is infinite. And at some point is at Tzimtzum. God contracts his infinite light, expresses 10 sphirot, 10 attributes, 10 divine attributes. Those 10 attributes are what we call the world of Atzilut, the world of emanation. When you say it's emanation, it's just God emanating, God revealing of himself. In that world, in that awareness, there is no creation. It's just God expressing himself. It's a world because it's finite. God's kindness, God's wisdom, God's judgment. It's a world, it's a limitation because it's not the infinity of God. So it's God expressing 10 limited expressions of himself. But it's still, there is no creation. There's nothing outside of God. After the first world, we get to the second world, which is called the world of Bria, the world of creation. That is already a consciousness other than God. From there, you get formation, where this consciousness becomes more formed. In other words, the consciousness of the creation is more felt. We'll talk about that in a second, the difference between emotion and intelligence and emotion. And the lowest world is the world of action, is the world we live in. Just one more point here is that when you talk about the world of creation and the world of formation, creation being higher, formation being lower, we already talked about this last week. The higher world, the world of creation, is the world of intelligence. The lower world, the world of formation, where the ego is more formed and more felt, is the world of emotion. And the reason for that is that in the intellectual realm, it's the person is more objective. It's not about the ego. It's not about myself. If I'm really objective and I'm really intellectual, then I really don't matter. If I know I'm wrong, I'm going to acknowledge, because it's not about me. It's about the idea. So that's more of a spiritual world. When you get to the second world, when you get to the third world, the world of formation, where the creation has been formed and solidified and became more concrete, that's the world of emotion. Because the world of emotion, it's all about me. The creation is in the center. The created being is in the center. When you get to the world of creation, first world, let's start from the top to the bottom. So at Atzilut, emanation is 1, creation is 2, formation is 3, action is 4, lowest world. So when you get to the second world, yes, there's a consciousness that's separate from God, but that consciousness wants to understand. And understand means it's not about me, it's about the objective truth. You get to the third world, lower world, the world of formation, where the consciousness has been solidified. Now it's about me. It's about, what do I feel? It's not about God. Okay, I like God, but it's about me. The subjective expression is rooted in the self, and that's why we're going to say that's this place of emotion, because emotion is less spiritual in the sense that the person feels himself more. Okay, so that's enough of the introduction. I don't know if it's enough. That's as much as we can say. That's as much as we can say before we jump in. If anybody wants to comment, I'd be grateful, because at least I know that we're on the same page or on the same Zoom. You see what I'm saying? That I'm not talking Kabbalistic lingo, but at least it's in the English language is coherent. So if not, we'll read and then we'll see. Maybe you tell me at the end if it's coherent. Okay. Okay, sharing the screen, I think. Whoops. It's a long chapter. I debated if I should use the other version that is not spelled out as much, but it's maybe easier to follow. We'll see. Okay, for this reason too, we already said this last week. We already said last week that if you serve God with meditation, if you serve God with emotion that is instinctual, in other words, it's the natural love we have for God, then that is the realm. Then your mitzvah goes up to the third. I'm going to get confused here. Then the mitzvah goes to the lower world of formation, of Yetzirah, because that's the world of emotion. But if you do the mitzvah so that's the third world, third from the bottom. I'm sorry, third from the top. That's the third world. If you serve God with emotion that was created through meditation, you're in the realm of meditation, you're a human being, you're on the higher level, you go to the world of creation, which is the second world from the top. And we're going to say the same thing as with the angels. The angels too are primarily emotional because they love God. That's their instinct. They're not considered, they don't have the quality, their for God doesn't have the quality of intellect, and therefore most of the angels are in the third world from the top, the world of formation, Yetzirah, formation, which is the world of emotion. Okay, so here we go. Mipnei zeh, for this reason, too, the angels are called chayot, beasts, and behemot, and animals, as it is written. This is in the prophets, in the chariot of Ezekiel, which we actually discussed on Wednesday. When Ezekiel sees God's divine chariot with angels, he refers to them as animals, right? He says an angel with the face of the lion is on the right of the divine chariot, and the face of an ox is on the left. Why are they called animals? For they have no freedom of choice between good and evil as man has, and their fear and love of God is natural to them. They did not create fear and love of God through intellectual contemplation of God's greatness, as written in Raya Mehemna Parshas Pinchas, which is the Zohar. Therefore, tzaddikim, righteous people, are on a higher level than the angels. The abode of the souls of tzaddikim is in the world of Bria, creation, which is the second world from the top. Whereas the abode of the angels is in the world of formation, Yetzirah, which is lower, which is the third world from the top. Why? Because a person, a human being, meditates intellectually and creates emotion that comes from intelligence. It's not coming from a place of that's instinctual, the natural love, the way it is with the angels. So we'll skip the bold, which is so the bold is the bold is okay. There's different. We're saying, but there are also some angels that are on a higher level. That's just Kabbalistic, important for the Kabbalistic idea here. This is only in the case of ordinary angels. There are, however, higher angels in the world of Bria, whose service of God is with intelligent fear and love, as it is written in Raya Mehemna in the Zohar, that there are two kinds of holy chayot, instinctive and intelligent, as it is written in Eitz Chaim. Let's leave that alone. The difference between Bria and Yetzirah is as follows. In other words, what's the difference in the second world, which you say that righteous souls can elevate to the second world, whereas the angels are only in the third world, they're lower. Why? In Yetzirah, only the midot, the emotions of the blessed Ein Sof radiate, meaning the love of him, dread and fear of him, and so on. As it is written in Tikkun Zohar and Eitz Chaim, that the six sfirot, meaning the emotional sfirot, nests in, i.e., pervade the world of Yetzirah. So you see, it's a very Kabbalistic chapter. It keeps going back to the Zohar and to the Eitz Chaim, which is the Arizal. So if you want to know all that, they come back later to read the chart. You'll read about all the Kabbalistic lingo here. But the bottom line is the third world, the world of formation, is the world of emotion. Therefore, this is the service of the angels whose abode is in the Yetzirah, as mentioned above, constantly, never ceasing, day or night, to stand in fear and dread of God. In other words, that's one group of angels that they serve God with awe. This refers to the entire host of angels under Gabriel, which is on the left. Left represents the midah of Gevura, which evokes fear and awe. The service of the host of angels under Michael, on the other hand, is love of God, and so on. In other words, you have different groups of angels that they have an emotional connection to God, but the point here is their emotional connection to God is instinctual, and therefore whatever it is, it is. If they're created with awe, then they have awe. If they're created with love, they have love. A human being, however, if you go to a human being with intelligence, could awaken emotion that is not instinctual. That's why that human being will go to the higher world, as we'll discuss. But in the world of Bria, radiate the Chachma, Bina, and Dat of the Blessed Ein Sof, the upper three Sfirot Chabad of Atzilut. In other words, in the world of Bria, you have intelligence, which are the source of Midot and their mother and root, as it is written in Tikkun Ezra, that Ima Ilah, the supernal mother, which is Bina, which is understanding, nests in the throne, meaning the world of Bria, with three Sfirot of Atzilut, Chacham, Bina, and Dat. So let's not get into again, too much Kabbalah. Simple terms, it's very simple. The second world, the world of Bria, is the world of intelligence. Lower than that, the third world is the world of emotion. And therefore, because these three Sfirot Chabad of the Ein Sof radiate in the world of Bria, it is therefore the abode of the souls of those tzaddikim who serve God with fear and love that stem from understanding and knowledge of God's greatness. If a person could create an emotion but he created it through meditation and understanding God's greatness, then you're dealing with intelligence. So then, therefore, your consciousness, you're in the consciousness of the second world, the world of creation, higher than the angels. This love is called Ru'uta Deliba, as mentioned above. Okay. From this Ru'uta Deliba, which is the will of the heart's desire, a garment is formed for the soul in the world of Bria, which is the higher Garden of Eden, as will be discussed further, as it is written in Zohar, Parshas Vayakel. The lower Garden of Eden is Yetzirah, and the higher Garden of Eden is Bria. According to the Kabbalah, there's two levels of the Garden of Eden, and there's Yetzirah and Bria, formation and creation. Again, world 2 or world 3. Where does your soul ascend after passing, depending on if your service of God was primarily emotional or primarily intellectual. Okay, we're going to elaborate upon this later. Okay. Now we're going to say, even the righteous, that you tell me the righteous souls go to the world of Bria, go to the higher world. They go to the world that is higher than the angels because they're intelligent. Well, that's only the part of the soul that is intelligent. But the emotional part of the soul remains in the third world. Because again, the third world is the world of emotion. Okay, this is important if you're a Kabbalist. However, this applies specifically only to the actual level of neshama of the tzaddikim. Neshama is the level of intelligence of the tzaddikim, and which represent a superior intellectual perception of the Blessed Ein Sof. But the level of ruach of tzaddikim, ruach is the emotion, and similarly, all other souls of Israel who serve God with the natural fear and love hidden in the heart of Israel, not the love of fear born of intellect, ascend thereto to Bria only on Shabbat and the new moon, and on the new moon. By means of the pillar that extends from the lower Garden of Eden to the higher Garden of Eden, the world of Bria, which is called higher Garden of Eden, to delight in God and bask in the radiance of His Shechina. Let's stop here for a second. According to the Kabbalah, what is Shabbat? Shabbat is that all the worlds ascend, all the worlds go to a higher level. And therefore, even though, spiritually speaking, my soul, if I'm not a righteous, if I'm not on the level of going to the higher world, the Bria, of the higher Gan Eden, the higher paradise, I'm not in the second world, I'm in the third world, but on Shabbat, the energy of all the worlds is elevated. And therefore on Shabbat, even though usually I'm in the consciousness of the third world, I can actually reach the consciousness of the second world. And later he's going to say, when we're talking about the first world, that when I pray, I can actually get to that consciousness as well. So the point here is, again, that depending, we're talking about spiritual worlds, which is basically spiritual consciousness. And depending on what level I am, that's where my soul elevates to. And we'll see in a minute, that's where my mitzvah goes to depending on what the mitzvah is motivated by. Which means I did the action, I built a home for God. Yes, wonderful. But what does that home feel like? What environment is in that home? Is that action, do you feel yourself or do you feel God in that home? Right? Sometimes I come to your house, I'm like, wow, I feel like the host. I feel like the hostess. Why? Because you have your presence felt there. So again, I walk into the home. What am I feeling? Well, that depends on what intention you had when you did the mitzvah. Oh, Baruch Hashem. Bob, go ahead, please.
Good morning, Rabbi. Thank you. Are we to believe that these four worlds are linear and there is a descent from the highest inspirational to the lowest deeds? Or is it more a circle so that if we're in the deeds or the action that somehow this line bends into a circle and then we can get a greater significance to the upper world without going back to the third, second, and then first.
Okay, so you're very good. You're very, very good. These in Kabbalah, there's two models. There's the linear model, which is called Or Pnimi, the internal light. And then there is and then there's the circular model, which we call Or Makif, encompassing light. And the short answer is that these four worlds are actually linear. It's Ishtalshut, it's a chain link you get from Atzilut to Bria to Yetzira and Asiya, and it's order. But the Kabbalah says, in addition to those, there's other energy that is actually circular, circles all of them, and that's more abstract concepts, more like will and pleasure, which we'll talk about later in chapter 48. And there, ironically, the will and the pleasure, because it surrounds the linear, the line, it surrounds it like a circle. So ironically, what happens is the lowest, the action, is actually closer to the encompassing lights than the formation and creation, if you see what I'm saying. Right? If you have a line and you have 4 steps on the line, the lowest step on the line is closer to the actual circle which surrounds the entire line than level 2 or 3, because it's the lowest. And that is a very deep Kabbalistic point where Keter, the highest level, which is higher than all of this that we're discussing, the highest and the lowest interconnect because of the encompassing light, because of the circular dimension.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but what we're saying here is this is very linear. Why is it linear? You start, let's forget about the highest word for a second. What is emotion? Okay, what is emotion? Emotion is I love something. Why do I love something? Let's talk about something very physical. I love a piece of steak. Okay, well, I don't know what example you want. I love ice cream. Why do I love ice cream? Because my perception, you cannot have love without perception. It's not necessarily an intellectual perception, but you have to understand, your mind has to tell you this is good for you. Once you have that intellectual perception, then your emotion responds. And that's why if you think something is good, but your mind will tell you, actually, this is poison, even though it looks like a beautiful fruit, but your mind tells you this is poison, you're not going to want it necessarily, if you really have that perception that it's no good. So we start with perception in a linear way. Perception leads to emotion, and emotion leads to action. Because if you want it, you're going to go get it. If you don't want it, you're not going to go get it. So in that sense, these 3 levels of perception, emotion, and action is very linear. Then you have sometimes where you have pleasure or will, that's the encompassing circle, and that bypasses all those levels. Because I can have the willpower. I say, you know what, I want to do this, even though I don't understand it, and even though I don't really have an emotional connection to it. But I decide I'm committing, I want to do that. That's the will going from the top of the circle all the way to the bottom of the circle, influencing the action without going through the linear stages of that what we call Hishtalshalut, the order of the evolution of the worlds, which then which in that case, if it's linear or and it's internalized, it has to be first intelligence, first awareness, intellectual awareness, the awareness of the mind, then emotion, then action. So that's the short answer. But
and in the linear construct, are we meant to believe that we're descending, that it's worse?
It's pejorative? That's a funny word. It's a funny word, worse. It's lower. The Kabbalah calls it lower. But what do you mean lower? We think of lower as linear. But one way to think about it, there's 2 ways to think about this, really. But in our relationship, it would be when I'm trying to connect to somebody else, when I'm trying to connect to God, okay? When I'm trying to connect to God, or even to somebody else, the closer I am to you, if you're my destination, I'm trying to connect to you. If you're my destination, then the closer I am to you, the higher I am. The closer I am to myself, the lower I am. Now, you could also spin it the other way, but that's not for right now. For right now, if my objective is to connect to you, so higher means less me, more you. Lower means more me, less you. Right? Let's say I want to have a relationship with you, but I don't really care about you. I just need you to sit across me, so when I eat my steak, I shouldn't be lonely. Okay, so that's totally me. It's not really about you. So that's lower in the context of the relationship. So now let's talk about emotion and intelligence. If I want to connect to your perspective and I love you, yes, I love you, but love is grounded in the self. I feel myself. I love you. I'm the center. I love you because of the way you make me feel. If I go to the level of intelligence, now I understand your perspective. Since the intelligence could be much more objective, then it's actually more you and less me. The more intellectual person doesn't really focus on the self; he focuses on the truth of the idea. So yes, you're right. We're classifying it as lower and higher, but it's in the context of the goal is to connect, is to transcend, to go beyond myself. And if the goal is to go beyond myself, to connect to another person, or in this case, to connect to God, then intelligence is higher, less me, more you. Now, there are other ways of putting it where closest to the soul is higher. We could do that too, but let's keep it this metaphor. The metaphor is in this case, because that's what we're talking about, relationship with God or relationship with another person. The closer I am to you, the higher I am, because that's my goal, that's my destination. Okay, now we talk about, so on Shabbat, all the worlds are elevated, and the people and the souls that are in the lower Gan Eden and the third world go up to the second world, and that's where they get the pleasure. What is the pleasure of paradise? What is the pleasure that the soul senses in paradise? That's to bask in the radiance of the Shekhinah, of the divine presence. But bask in the radiance means enjoy the understanding, the intellect of created beings. The light delights and derives pleasure only in that which is conceived, understand and knows and grasps with its intellectual and understanding as much as it can grasp of the blessed Ein Sof light through his wisdom and his understanding which radiate there. In other words, the greatest pleasure is for the soul to understand as much as possible in the infinite light of God. And depending on how much light is available to understand is depending which world you're in. You're in the world of the third world formation, or the higher world, the second world of creation. And all week, so if you're the souls of the righteous tzaddikim who love God with the emotion that is generated through intelligence, then the intelligent part of the soul is in the higher world. The emotional part of the soul, and most souls who serve God with more of an innate and natural and instinctual love and fear, love and awe, those are in the lower level. But on Shabbat they elevate to the higher level to get to deeper level of pleasure. Now you're going to say it's not fear. The angels who serve God instinctively with their natural love always remain in the lowest, in the third world, whereas souls on Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh ascend to the second world. Why? It's not fear. They're also only serving God with emotion that comes from the instinct. In other words, the natural emotion. The answer is, oh yeah, because we have to exercise freedom of choice to be able to do it. The angels have no distraction. We have distractions. So because it's our effort, therefore we get the merit, we can go up. These souls who serve God with natural love and fear are privileged to rise occasionally to Beriah higher than the angels, although they too, like the angels, served God only with a natural fear and love, because through their fear and love, the Sitra Achra, clothing the body, is subdued. So in other words, we're battling the negativity. Whether in this case, in the case of fear, in the realm of turning away from evil, conquering and crushing their desires, or whether in the realm of doing good, as mentioned above, these souls have freedom of choice. They might have chosen evil, God forbid, yet they chose good to subdue the Sitra Achra so that God's glory be revealed in all worlds, similar to the superiority of light emerging from the darkness, as mentioned above. In other words, yes, even the souls who serve God with the natural love, just like the angels, nevertheless, on Shabbat, their soul will go up from the second world from the third world to the second world to a higher level, because yes, they had to exercise free choice to be able to serve God even with instinctual and natural love. Okay. Now we're getting a little more Kabbalah, so you have to excuse me. I didn't want to say this in the introduction. I don't want to scare you away. But if you're still here, that means you're brave. Now we're making a distinction between, in every world, there is the soul in that world, that the soul perceives the awareness of that world. But then there's the actual mitzvah and the Torah that I do. The Torah that I do, as we mentioned in chapter 35, the Torah I do and the mitzvah, the energy of the Torah and the mitzvah actually become fused and become one with God himself. So what we're gonna say is like this. What we're gonna say, in every world, you have the 10 sphirot of that world. That's the godliness in that world. And then what he calls it, you have the palaces of that world, which is the creations of that world. So if I serve God, if I do a mitzvah, and I have emotional motivation for that, knows I have a love and fear that is natural to me, but I reveal that natural love and fear, then my consciousness rises to the world of the consciousness of my soul. I don't necessarily feel it, but my soul feels it. The consciousness of my soul rises to the third world, the world of formation. But it's only hanging out in the palaces of that world. In other words, it doesn't become one with the godliness of that world because I'm still a creation. But the mitzvah that I do becomes one with the 10 sfirot of that world, depending on what world we're talking about. Because the mitzvah becomes united with godliness much more than the creation. So let's read a little bit. I don't know exactly what this means, but we'll find out. All the aforesaid concerns the abode and station of the souls. Their Torah and divine service, however, are actually absorbed in the 10 sfirot, which are a manifestation of godliness and with which the Ein Sof light unites in perfect unity. In other words, specifically, this means to the 10 that one's Torah and divine service is sent to the 10 sfirot of Bria by intellectual fear and love and to the 10 sfirot of Yetzirah by natural fear and love. Now within them are clothed the 10 sfirot of the world of Atzilut, and they are completely unified with them. And the 10 sfirot of Atzilut are in turn perfectly unified with the emanator of the blessed Ein Sof. Blessed Ein Sof. It follows then that by ascending to the sfirot of Bria or Yetzirah, the soul's Torah and divine service actually unite with the Ein Sof. So this is basic Kabbalah. And that is that you have the chain of the worlds, you have the infinite light, then you have the 10 sfirot of Atzilut. Then those 10 sfirot of Atzilut become lessened, and you get 10 sfirot of Bria. Then the lessened even more becomes 10 sfirot of Yetzirah. But the point here is, in all the 10 sfirot, they all kind of clothe with each other. So in the lower worlds, there's more coverings covering over the light. So the light that we see is diminished. But within the 10 sfirot of one world lies the 10 sfirot of the higher world, and ultimately lies the infinite light. So it really doesn't matter which level of the 10 sfirot you unite to. Ultimately, if your Torah and mitzvah are absorbed in any of the 10 sfirot, ultimately by a chain-like evolution, it's really connected to the infinite light of God. So we're making a distinction between the perception of the creation, which is the soul, and the actual Torah, which is completely absorbed within the light of God, as opposed to the soul is not. The soul is its own entity with its own ego, as we discussed earlier, which is part of the reason of the superiority of action over perception and over intelligence, because the action becomes completely subdued and completely absorbed within God. Go ahead, Bob.
Are the 10 sfirot in each category the same?
They're the same idea. Yeah, there's always kindness. But again, what level of kindness? You can have the kindness of the highest world, which is more infinite and more intense. Then you can have lesser degrees. So it's more and more coverings, right? So that's really the idea. It's all the same. It's 10 sfirot. Each sfirah is the same in all the worlds. It's just how concealed is the light, how diminished is the light. And this is a basic Kabbalistic concept, which is that the way God creates the world is through Seder Hishtalshalut. It doesn't go from the infinite light of God to this physical world, but there's a chain of worlds. And in each world, the same phenomenon exists, but in a diminished level. But what we're saying here is, but it's diminished, it's concealed, there's more coats. So let's say you have a person walks into a house and you put on one covering, and then goes to the next house, you put on another covering, put in as many coverings you want. Ultimately, inside all these coverings is the person. And that's what we're saying. Within the 10 sfirot of the lower level, there's the 10 sfirot of the higher level. And then ultimately, within the 10 sfirot of the highest level is there's the infinite light of God. So ultimately, it's just a way of explaining how the infinite light of God could be here, but even though we don't see it. We don't see it because we're in a lower world with more coverings. But the reality is that all worlds, including the lowest world, has the 10 sfirot, and within those 10 sfirot are enclosed the 10 sfirot of the higher world, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so that's the mitzvah that you do itself. The souls, on the other hand, are not absorbed into the godliness of the 10 sfirot, but stand instead in the chambers and abodes of the Bria or Yetzirah. They are the souls, the light in the radiance of the Shekhinah, meaning the blessed Ein Sof, as it is unified in the 10 sfirot of Bria and Yetzirah. In other words, the soul enjoys the understanding of God. Okay, so that means that means it does not lose its identity. It has its own ego. It understands God. Wonderful. That means it's in the chamber. That means it's in the chamber of the world of Yetzirah or Bria, formation or creation, world 2 or world 3. But you're not one with the light of Ein Sof, because you still maintain your identity. Okay, and this radiance that they enjoy is actually the ray of the light of their own Torah, For the reward of the mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. Okay, let's continue. Now we're going to get, okay, so that we spoke about world 2 and world 3. World 2 was the world of intelligence. World 3 was the world of emotion. Now we're going to talk about the world of Atzilut, the highest world. Highest world is beyond understanding. What's higher than intelligence is subconscious. So what we're going to say, the world of Atzilut, you don't have even understanding. It's about you don't sense yourself, period. If you're in the consciousness of the world of Atzilut, you will only sense God. And what we're going to say is there are few righteous people who are so united with God that they have the perception of the world of Atzilut where they don't feel themselves at all, and they are only as a chariot, the way we said in chapter 35 earlier, which chapter 20, 30, whatever it was, 33, that the Talmud says that the patriarchs and matriarchs were a chariot to God. What it means, they have no ego, they have no identity, their own identity. They're in the perception of Atzilut, where you don't sense anything other than God. So we're going to say that exists as well, but only for very, very few people. The world of Atzilut is beyond the intelligence grasp and understanding of created beings in intellect. For the Chachma Bina Data, the Ein Sof are united with him there in perfect unity. In other words, if you're in the world of Atzilut, the intelligence there is too deep for us to understand because the intelligence there senses the infinity and we cannot sense the infinity. In a profound and wonderful unity and infinitely superior to that unity found in Bria. For there, in Bria, they descended to illuminate only to a restricted degree, as to enable the intellect of created beings to receive Chabad, wisdom, from these Sfirot of Atzilut, so that they might know God, and so they might grasp and comprehend something of the Ein Sof light, to the extent that the intellect of finite, limited created beings is capable of understanding, lest they dissolve out of existence, unless they furthermore cease altogether to exist as created beings, reverting instead to their source and root, namely Godness himself. In other words, when you get to the Bria, you get to the second world, it's already the light is diminishing so that creations could understand it, can grasp it. But in Atzilut, and this contraction, this tzimtzum, thus causes the souls in the world of Bria to be illuminated by a glow of Chabad of the Ein Sof. Because the light in the second world, the light is diminished, that's why people could perceive it and understand it. The created intellectual beings of Bria cannot, however, comprehend Chabad as they are in the world of Atzilut, where the Chabad are not contracted to such a greater degree as in Bria. And therefore, their thought cannot grasp it at all. For this reason, Atzilut is the abode of the great tzaddikim, whose service of God is far superior even to fear and love derived from understanding and knowing his greatness. Just as Atzilut transcends by far on the level of the understanding and knowledge of the created being's intellect, their service is rather on the level of an actual chariot of blessed Ein Sof, nullifying their very existence before him and incorporating themselves and all they possess within his light through the observance of the Torah and the mitzvot. Our sages applied such a description to the patriarchs, saying that they themselves constituted the divine chariot, for this was the patriarchs' level of service throughout their lives. Okay. Now we're going to say, Bob, you have a question, or it's the same hand as before? If you have a question, please jump in.
Sorry, no, I'm going to lower it.
No, okay, perfect. No, I have. Okay, I only want you to lower it so you can raise it, and then we'll know that you raised it. Okay, now we're going to say most people can't reach this level of not feeling themselves at all, but you could do it occasionally. When is that? When you pray the Amidah, Shmona Esrei. According to the Kabbalah, prayer has four parts, because when we pray, if you pray properly, if you pray according to the Kabbalistic teachings, then every level of prayer leads you to another rung. And when you get to Atzilut, when you get to the Amidah, the highest level, you're standing before God. Even the code of law says you have to stand like a servant before a servant before the king. You're supposed to lose perception of self. So a person through prayer could reach a level of Atzilut, because in prayer shines the light, the awareness of Atzilut. How that aligns with the idea that the prayer we're actually asking for our own needs is another discussion, not for right now, maybe at the end. But he whose soul's root is too limited a capacity for this perfect service in the level of a chariot, so that through his service of Torah and mitzvot, he is constantly nullified before and absorbed in God's light, and he can therefore attain the state only intermittently and only at times of divine favor on high, such as during the Shemona Esrei prayer, which is at the level of Atzilut. So most people can only reach this level occasionally, especially when bowing in the four designated places in this prayer. When we bow during the Amidah, for every such act of bowing represents the level of Atzilut, as it is written in Pri Etz Chaim in the section dealing with the welcoming of Shabbat. So according to the Kabbalah, according to Arizal explains that even though in general all of the Amidah is Atzilut, the places that we bow is certainly Atzilut, because bowing represents I'm subjugating my identity to God. For it embodies the idea of self-nullification in God's light, to be accounted as absolutely naught before him. So if such a person, he's usually, so I only can get to the level of Atzilut. On occasion, so my soul is usually in Bria. Sometimes it ascends to Atzilut. Then even on these times, the principal abode of his soul is in the world of Bria. And only occasionally, at the time of divine favor, will his soul arise to Atzilut as feminine waters. As is known in the students of Kabbalah, feminine waters means awakening from below, meaning that a person raises himself from below to above, and you can occasionally get to the world of Atzilut. Okay, this is absolutely fascinating if you're a Kabbalist. Okay, now we're going to say, okay, the reward of mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. This means that we can know the essential nature of a rank of a mitzvah by its reward. So if you tell me that if you do a certain mitzvah, you go to the world of Atzilut, Bria, Yitzira, that tells you about the mitzvah itself. So now Rabbi Shneur Zalman says, now we will not be concerned ourselves with explaining hidden matters. Let's leave Atzilut alone. Atzilut is too elevated for us. Meaning the great tzaddikim who are at the level of a chariot. We're not going to deal with that. But only with those matters revealed to us, to which every man must aspire. One must know with certainty that the essential nature and rank of divine service with fear and love revealed in the heart, derived from understanding and knowledge of the greatness of the blessed Ein Sof, its place is in the 10th sphere of Bria. And the service motivated by natural fear and love in one's mind, its place is in the 10th sphere of Yitzira. So this is actually funny. He says, let's not deal with mystical. Mystical is Atzilut. Let's speak practical. What's practical? Practical is if you derive emotion based on intellectual contemplation, then you're in the world of Bria. If you just awaken your natural love to God, then you're in Yitzira. That's obvious. You don't have to be a mystic for that. But now we say, what happens if a person serves God with no emotion at all? It's just doing the mitzvah without proper intention. And certainly if he's doing it for a negative intention. Oh, so now we're going to go into ideas that it doesn't ascend and you may have to do tshuva. It gets technical, but bear with me. We want to make a dash to the end of the chapter. But divine service performed without arousing one's fear and love to a revealed state, even in one's mind, meaning that he doesn't even arouse the natural love hidden in one's heart, so that it will be emerged from the hidden recesses of the heart to be revealed at least in one's mind and in the latency of his heart. If instead the love remains hidden in the heart as in the native state as it was before the divine service, such service remains below in this world of separation, which is the lowest world, the world of action, which we refer to as the world of separation, and the level of the externality of the worlds. It has not the power to rise and be absorbed in God's unity, meaning the 10 holy sfirot, as it is written to Tikkun Zohar, that without fear and love, it does not fly upward, and it cannot rise to stand before God. We're going to talk about that at great length in next week's chapter, that love and awe are like two wings that elevate the mitzvah, and therefore you have to have two wings, the love and the awe, as will be explained in the future chapters. In any case, now we're going to say this is not talking about someone who goes against God, who's learning for a negative motivation. Even if someone is just doing it by route, that's what his father taught him to do. That's what his mother taught him to do. He did not awaken the emotion. Still, the mitzvah, you're creating a home for God, but you're not elevating the awareness. This inability of one's divine service to ascend to the sphere applies not only when one's motive for engaging in Torah mitzvah is actually shalol lishma, not for its own sake, i.e. for some ulterior motive, heaven forbid. Even if, as the verse describes it, their fear of me was like commandments of men done by rote. I'm just doing it because I always do it. Meaning that one serves God out of the habit acquired by his youth, having been trained and taught by his father and teacher to fear God and to serve him. But he does not really do it for its own sake. What does for its own sake means? For the sake of God. To do something for the sake of someone else, you have to either be in awe or in love. For it is impossible to serve God truly lishma for its own sake without arousing one's natural fear and love, at least by bringing them out from the concealment of the heart into the revelation, at least in the mind and in the latency of the heart. For just as one does not do something for his fellow to carry out his friend's will, unless he loves him or fears him, so too it is impossible to act truly for God's sake solely in order to carry out his will, unless he remembers and arouses his love and fear of God to some degree in his mind, thought, and the latent level of his heart, at least. And we're going to get into that later. Furthermore, the arousal of love alone, without the arousal of at least the lower level of fear of God hidden in every Jewish heart, is not called service. This will be explained later. That's chapter 41. We'll leave that alone for right now. So in other words, even if I do the mitzvah, I'm doing it by route. I'm doing it just because it's my habit. I did not awaken even the hidden love in my heart, the natural hidden love. I didn't awaken that. then the mitzvah cannot arise. In other words, you're creating a home for God, but there's no atmosphere, there's no emotion, no beauty invested in that home. Now we're going to go to the worst level, someone who's actually learning and studying Torah, doing a mitzvah for an ulterior purpose. Now we're going to say that's actually good. That in short, what we're going to say is temporarily it's unholy. Temporarily it goes to the realm of the negative. But don't worry, the sages say one should always study Torah, even for ulterior motive, because from the ulterior motive you'll come to do it for the proper motive. And the way that Kabbalah explains it is when you're going to come back to do it properly, it will elevate all those past experiences. So let's see what Rabbi Shneur Zalman says. However, when one engages in divine service explicitly not lishma, but for an ulterior motive of self-glorification, as for example, in order to become a scholar and the like, then this motive, which is derived from the klipat noga, which is the unholy motive, clothes itself in his Torah study. The Torah studied in this motive is in the state of exile within the klipa, but only temporarily until he repents, since repentance brings healing to the world. But when he returns to God, the Torah returns with him from the klipa to holiness. Therefore, our sages of blessed memory said, one should always engage in Torah and mitzvot, even shalom lishma, even not for the proper purpose, motive. For out of shalom lishma, not for the proper motive, he will certainly arrive at study and observance of lishma. Since it is certain that he will ultimately repent, whether in this incarnation or the next, because no one is banished from him by his sins, because no one banished from him by his sins will remain banished. That's a verse, the book of Samuel, but will ultimately repent. Ultimately, all the energy will come back to holiness. Now we're going to say, when a person learns just by route, forget it, he doesn't have a positive motive, it doesn't have a negative motive, then it's actually even easier to pull it back up to holiness. You don't even have to do teshuvah, you just have to learn it again with the proper intention. But if one acts neutrally, neither lishma nor shalom lishma, then the matter is not contingent on repentance. You don't need repentance. Rather, as soon as he reviews the subject lishma, then he, for his proper sake, then even that which he had studied neutrally soars on high, attaching itself to and joining his present study. Since the klipat noga had yet clothed itself in his previous study, we're almost done, right? Therefore, a man should always occupy himself with Torah, even shalom lishma, not for the proper reason. For out of shalom lishma, he will come lishma. And now we're going to say the same is true of prayer without kavanah, as discussed in the Zohar. We'll take Vicky's question in a second. Thank you all for joining. What I felt in this chapter is he keeps quoting the Zohar, Tikkunei Zohar, Eitz Chaim, which is all the classic Kabbalistic works, because this is a very Kabbalistic chapter, a little bit out of character for Tanya, I think, at least the first part of Tanya. We're going to go a little bit more Kabbalah next week, but then it comes more practical, where we talk about practical, relative to Kabbalah, practical, which is how to meditate and how to awaken. We start first with awe. It talks about the importance of awe, which is underemphasized in the modern world, but also, and then he goes to fear, and he goes all kinds of meditations. And then we go to Tanya chapter 47, talks about the Exodus of Egypt, and then we go to 48 and 49, which discuss what Bob mentioned, which is the Sovev, the encompassing light. And then we go to the idea of making the world a dwelling place to Hashem. But to explain that, we have to figure out, what does it mean that God dwells in this world? What does it mean God dwells in the Holy Temple? So we have our work cut out for ourselves. But we're making progress. We're almost 40. We're up to chapter 40. So congratulations for making this journey. We already feel that we're getting a handle of the book. So thank you all for joining. Go ahead, Vicky.
Well, thank you, Rabbi. It was a fascinating chapter for me. It was very,
Because you're a Kabbalist. What am I going to do? I can't make heads or tails of this chapter, but you like it.
but I do have a few questions. My first question for the Beinoni, what is the benefit, actually, continuing your metaphor of the building and the exterior interior, right? Like the building and then interior, it's like basically enhancing the quality of life, right? So by doing that interior, you're enhancing the quality of life. That's my first question.
Okay, so let's stop for a second. What is this? Why do I need to know this to be a Beinoni? Right? It's nice information. I'll take a class when I have time in the summer. But why does the Beinoni need to know this? Is basically, I think, restating your question. The answer is like this. The Beinoni has a problem, which means he always, every morning when he wakes up, he has to battle the negativity within his soul. Now, he figured out how to manage it. He understands his thought, speech, and action. I'm in complete control of thought, speech, and action. Mind can control the heart. I'm always in control. No problem. My thought, speech, and action are fine. The fact that I have negative impulses, it's not my problem. I'm not a tzaddik. I sometimes get depressed. Okay, so I learn chapters 26 to 34, right? So I'm fine. Problem for the Beinoni is in chapter 35. We said 1 second, but a person feels like he's accomplishing nothing. If every day I have to battle my negativity, I'm accomplishing nothing. So we have to shift the conversation. We're saying the fact that you have you're going to always have to battle in your life is fine. You're still accomplishing. What are you accomplishing? You're accomplishing is you're building a home for God. That's the purpose of your creation. And we spent 3 chapters telling you what you're accomplishing, Mr. Beinoni. It's hard work. You wake up in the morning, you want to go rob the bank, you want to go indulge, but you make the right choice in your thought, speech, and action. You're working hard, but you have that ongoing battle, but don't worry, you're achieving your purpose of creation, which is building a home for God. But then we say, but Mr. Beinoni, look, you also have to make a nice home. So yes, you can rid yourself of negativity. You can't make yourself love only God, but at least what you can do is when you do the mitzvah, before you do the mitzvah, try to awaken and try to be conscious of your natural love to God, the love to God of the godly soul. Because when you do that, not only are you building a home for God, but you're building a beautiful home for God. Now, does that mean that's going to solve all your internal problems, all your internal tension? Of course not. Because after I did the mitzvah, I went to shul, I davened, I meditated, did a mitzvah, I gave charity. 5 minutes later, I have negative desires. That's okay. So your job is to battle and to give God pleasure. But don't feel like you're not doing anything, because first of all, you're doing the purpose of creation, building a home for God. And even more than that, you're actually capable of actually designing, bringing some interior design to the home that you're making for God. Because you could awaken within yourself, either if you're on the higher level, the emotions, the love and awe, which comes through intellectual contemplation. But if not, at least be conscious of your natural love to God. Now, like I said, it's important for the Beinoni to realize this, because it's what he could do and what he can't do. And while the first 35 chapters of Tanya focus on the fact that you really cannot control your emotion, but now we're saying you can't control your emotion, but you can create enough positive emotion to motivate you, to give you the proper intention when you do the mitzvah. That doesn't mean you're not going to have negative emotions as well.
But as a side benefit, you're also perfecting your character, and that's how.
To a degree. In other words, to a degree, because you're always going to have that tension. You're not ridding yourself. There should be no illusions that you're going to be able to get to the point where I have no negative desire. I wake up in the morning, I have no temptation. That's not the Beinoni. You have temptation, but again, that temptation doesn't mean you can't control thought, speech, and action. That's the starting point. But beyond that, you can fulfill the purpose of creation, which is to build a home for God, and you can build a beautiful home for God. When we say beautiful, we mean that in that action that you do, you actually have the perception of the second or third world. You can have the awareness of God and feel a love, feel the presence of God, not throughout the entire day, but at least when you're doing the mitzvah.
Thank you, Rabbi. Yeah, so with proper intention and with practice, you can actually achieve, you can actually refine your character to a degree, of course. Right. Which brings me to the second question about tzaddikim. Do tzaddikim, because they feel naturally they are in a brier a lot of times, like not in a brier, in the highest world, right? I don't know, forgot what it's called.
Some tzaddikim are atzilus, not all tzaddikim. There are unique tzaddikim.
So my question is, do tzaddikim need to do like backwards meditation in order not to remain there like sons of Aaron?
I think so. I think for the tzaddik, the challenge would be that I don't know how hard it is. A tzaddik is in line with God's will. But we're trying to go up. The tzaddik is trying to bring light down. The tzaddik's job is to bring light down. Yeah, I don't know much about the tzaddikim. Rabbi Shner Zalman, they say he wrote a book called The Book of Tzaddikim and he burnt it. That's the legend. So I don't know. My daughter is fascinated by who's a tzaddik and how if a tzaddik has to struggle to become a tzaddik. She knows all the answers. I tell her, I don't know. She says she knows. Okay, I don't know. What am I going to tell you? I don't know. I'm in the world of the Beinoni, so hard to know. I guess there's some variation. Because in Tanya chapter 1, the example of a tzaddik, someone who has no evil inclination, is from King David. Now, we all know, if you read the Bible, King David does have an evil inclination, and he does sin. But the Tanya quotes the Talmud that says that he killed his evil inclination through fasting after the sin. In other words, through repentance, which means at least King David was not born a tzaddik. He was born with the potential to become a tzaddik, but he achieved that potential. Where the Tanya says most people don't even have the potential to be born a tzaddik. I can fast for 120 years. I'm still not going to rid myself from the animal soul. But the short answer is I don't know.
Okay, yeah, but it makes sense that the world cannot contain it because it can be misused. Which brings me, if Ben and you will do that same thing that tzaddik does, it can be negative consequences.
Yeah, I think so.
Which brings me to the third question: what if somebody studies Torah not only with like neutral, no emotions at all, but with the desire to pervert the context, to use it in his own benefit?
So the Talmud says it's a sin, and sometimes it says you're not allowed to teach that person Torah, but the person himself say study all you want, study, because it's temporary, not positive, but in the long run it will be elevated. So that's what the statement. The olam, always a person should always study Torah, even if it's for a negative intention, because that ultimately will bring you back.
So it is believed to be temporary.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now, our idea of temporary, we have patience. So Rabbi Shneur Zalman says maybe this incarnation, maybe next incarnation. So we're in no rush. But ultimately, it's temporary. Yes. Ultimately, this Torah, any word of Torah learned, ultimately will come back to its source. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead, Bob, please.
I'm just to emphasize, in a way, this is kind of all the chapters we've learned before. We're kind of turning it on its head. Before we had thought, speech, and action, where action is, the supreme, and now we're descending into action.
Right.
So I get it, the intention, but sometimes a good person learns to be a good person and it comes naturally, so that they don't intentionally do their goodness. I mean, they're just good. They perform mitzvahs on their own, and you're telling me that that's actually a lesser world.
So we're going to continue on this theme in 40, and the idea is going to be that your action has to be imbued with some. Let's say you're a kind person, okay? And I come to you and I say, Bob, could you do me a favor? Could you, I don't know, buy me a coffee, whatever it may be? Could you loan me $5, whatever it may be? You're a kind person, so you're going to do the kind action. But what Rabbi Shneur Zalman is saying, if you, for a second, are conscious of your kindness, then the action will be done differently. I will feel better because I will sense your kindness more. In other words, yes, of course, everybody's at a different starting point. But even the person who's kind naturally, if that action is imbued with perception, where the person says, I empathize with you, right? So a kind person, they can give me, you can do me a favor. You can do me a favor with empathy and without empathy. What does empathy mean? Empathy means that your awareness, you're not just giving me action, but you're also giving me your awareness. And what Rabbi Shneur Zalman is saying, to go to the higher world, you need awareness, because you're saying I have good action. Okay, so that remains in the lowest world, the world of action. But if you want to have the feeling, the person received the feeling, right? Let's say I need $5 from you, okay? I say, Bob, can I have $5? Can you loan me $5? You gave me the $5. I'm very happy. Why am I happy? Because I have the $5, not because I have you. But if I sense that when you gave me the $5, you're not just giving me $5, you're giving me empathy, then I'm happy because I say, I have you. You're my friend. Now I'm happier that I have your friendship than I have your $5. And that's what Rabbi Shneur Zalman is saying. Rabbi Shneur Zalman is saying that when you're going to do the mitzvah, what is God getting? Is he getting your action? Wonderful. Then you're in the lower world. If he's getting your feeling and your emotion and your perception, then you're designing his home. You're not just giving him a place to live, but you're making it beautiful because he feels you.
But I could argue that if you asked me, Bob, can you give me $5, and I immediately went in my pocket and gave it to you, and just because I was a good person, that's a pure emotion. If you wanted me to if you wanted me to sort of say, hey, Bob, you could feel better about yourself, give Menachem a $5 bill, and thus you're a better person. That's more selfishly motivated. It's not for you, it's almost for me.
Okay, so that's true. When you talk about emotion, you have to figure out if it's selfless or selfish. That's true. All love, you have to be worried about that. But I think we agree that it's not about the time. It's not about how much time does it take to meditate. And if you're a kind person, you can awaken the love very quickly, or the compassion or the empathy very quickly. But I think we could agree that some people, they do kindness, but the recipient doesn't necessarily feel the empathy. And then somebody else, the recipient feels the empathy, and empathy means that you feel me, you feel my pain. Not that you feel how great you are. That's a wonderful thing as well, because you happen to be a great guy. But empathy means I feel the other person. So I'm not motivating, and I'm not saying, oh, I'm so great, I want to have kindness. No, but I'm saying I feel I love you, and therefore I'm doing this for you. That's why Rabbi Shneur Zalman defined love and awe in this week's part, in this chapter. He said, you're not going to do something for someone else unless you sense the emotional connection to him. Meaning you can do it, you can do the action, but it's not going to be felt in that same way. So I agree that you can have emotion that is self-oriented, but that's not, I don't think that's what we're talking about. We're talking about that you're doing me a favor, you're giving me the $5, but I feel not just the $5, but I feel the empathy. And that actually is one when that it's not just an action, but it's a beautiful action. And then this action rises not just to not only to the world of practicality, where I was able to take the $5 and buy myself a slice of bread, which is a practical thing, but it's also raised my spirits because it was actually a spiritual act, because you imbue your action with perception, with awareness, with connection, with empathy. And I sense that empathy.
It's lofty. Yeah, okay, I can see it. It's just
I agree.
hard for me to see how ego doesn't get in the way, and how
Ego is a
if you
problem.
asked me a favor and there was a hesitation on my part as I'm gathering up my intention, you might view it as maybe he really doesn't want to do it. And that
So
you
you
might
have
react
to-
better to a reflexive, sure.
Could be. There could be that in that example, you're right, because you have other person may misunderstand. But let's talk about ego for a second. We're less concerned about ego because the eradication of ego is an atzilut. Ultimately, if you're not an atzilut, there's always going to be an ego. But what we're trying to say here, so we're not, ego is not the enemy. The enemy, what we're trying to say here is you're connecting to somebody else, to God, or to give me $5. Are you giving them just an action, or are you giving them part of yourself? And yes, it makes you feel good. That's okay. You want to be a chariot. You want egoless. That's already a very high level. But what we're trying to say here is, this is any example. You take someone out for dinner. Did you give them the steak, or you gave them your present so that they feel that you're present and they feel that you want to be here? You bought someone a flower. You bought someone a birthday gift. Is it a gift, or is it the gift is imbued with emotion and they could sense it? What's the difference? I bought you a new iPod. What do you care if when I gave it to you, if you sense that I really love you and I really want to give it to you? You wanted an iPod. I bought you an iPod. The point here is, what are you giving me? Are you giving me something in the world of action, or are you giving me some of yourself, which would be love, which would be awe?
Beautiful. Thanks, Relly.
Thank you. Go ahead, Karina. You know what? I have a little.
Okay. Now, two things. One, regarding this, with
Karina, can I interrupt for a second, because I have a little. Not in
Okay.
my. Someone's at the door, so I have to try to open the door. Let me try to pause this recording. Pause.